Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has repeatedly said the national vaccine rollout is not a race. How many Australians are in ICU today?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The current total in ICU for the whole of Australia is 70, Mr Speaker. 67 of those are in New South Wales. Mr Speaker, in addition to that, 30 lives have been lost this year to COVID, and 941 in total have been lost. And every single one of those deaths is a terrible tragedy for those families. It is a terrible tragedy. But we also know, Mr Speaker, that in this country, we have been able to prevent and avoid more than 30,000 deaths because of the collective actions of Australians in this country and the responses that have been put in place. Mr Speaker, overseas, people don't just know someone who might have had COVID, they know someone who's died of COVID. And in too many cases, they know of many people who have died of COVID. In this country, Mr Speaker, our experience has been very different. And it hasn't just been the saving of lives, which has been so paramount in our thinking as a government, as we have responded, as we've continued to bring Australians together, indeed the states and territories together, as we have done throughout on over 50 occasions over the course of this pandemic. But it has also been about saving livelihoods. More than 30,000 lives saved and 1 million Australians back in jobs since last year's COVID recession, Mr Speaker. And Mr Speaker, at the end of these lockdowns, I know one thing will happen, and that is the Australian economy will surge back. And I know that because that is exactly what occurred after the last COVID recession, Mr Speaker, after the last impact. And indeed, we will see how things pan out over the months ahead. But I know this, the supports that we've put in to support the Australian economy, whether it was last year through JobKeeper, Mr Speaker, and the COVID supplement and the cash flow boost, and the many supports we put in place that saw the Australian economy through, ensured that we were one of the few countries in the world that had an economy larger on the other side of the pandemic than at the beginning, and more people in work, Mr Speaker, than before. And at the same time had prevented, through collective actions, 30,000 Australians at least not perishing. Mr Speaker, that puts Australia in a league amongst very few countries in the world today. It remains now for us to complete that job as we move towards the end of this year. And we see 70% of our country vaccinated, and hopefully 80%, Mr Speaker. And I want to thank Australians each and every day going out there and getting that vaccination as we hit, Mr Speaker, rates of vaccination which is up there with the world's best, Mr Speaker, as we are going through these most recent weeks. Amongst these most recent weeks, Mr Speaker, 1.3 million vaccinations in a 7-day period, Mr Speaker. That is where both the United States and the UK were operating per capita at a similar level, Mr Speaker. That is what our vaccination program is now achieving, and I thank Australians for supporting it.